Are you looking for better health but feel a little overwhelmed with it all, thinking there might be something missing? Maybe you're looking for action steps to take that get to the real root of the issue and actually move the needle in your health. Here on the Cornerstone Integrative Healing Podcast, we will share the link between our physical, emotional, and spiritual health, all while pointing you to the one and only true healer, Jesus. I'm Kari, Coody, your co-host. As a pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner, I spent 20 years in the traditional healthcare world, and it was definitely long enough to know there's a huge need for preventative healthcare and holistic healing. I'm excited to have conversations around these topics with my co-host and friend, Jenn.
Hey, I'm Jenn Patriarca. God gave me this desire to help others with natural healing a long time ago. With more than 20 years of experience in the functional nutrition field, God decided it was time to join forces. Kari and I are colleagues turned faithful partners in this mission God has put on our hearts. A mission for true healing, one that encompasses an integrative approach. With Jesus taking the lead, our aim is to point you toward Him as we help you peel back the layers. Through conversations, you can expect straightforward information on holistic health topics that include physical, emotional, and spiritual action steps that will create real change in your health, and honest conversations around the ups and downs that can come with healing. It's time to have joy in your life again and the energy to do all that God has called you to. Be sure to subscribe for new episodes every Monday. Welcome back. Kari and I are here for episode 9, and we're continuing the series on emotion and organ connection explained. So I know we talked a little bit about liver last week and anger, and we're just going to continue to talk about some organs that have a connection with an emotion. And this week we're going to talk about gallbladder. Right, Kari?
Yes, we were talking when we were looking through our notes and just kind of looking over what we were going to share. We were like, we really need to spend a lot of time on this because
yes,
this
super
is
important.
super important and key. And so we hope that we help you to see that from a physical standpoint and also an emotional standpoint. So that's kind of our goal for today. But we might spend a little bit more time on the physical because I think this one is just really key with a lot of symptoms that people often feel and maybe don't associate it with the gallbladder. Wouldn't you say that's probably correct?
Absolutely. Yes. And Kari, how many times would you say, at least for women, especially because we work with, I would say 99% of women, do you see a gallbladder issue?
I mean, yeah, liver, gallbladder, so super connected. And I would say almost every single person that I look at their labs and I'm looking at their symptoms and I'm thinking, we need more liver support. But you're kind of chasing your tail if you leave off the gallbladder and leave off the emotional component too. So I hope that you can kind of see that as we chat through some of these things.
Yeah. So we'll spend a lot of time today on gallbladder. So what does forgiveness have to do with digestion? So that's what we're going to dig into today. But first we just want to talk a little bit just about the background of gallbladder. Like, what does it do? Why is bile so important? By the way, the gallbladder stores bile. It does not produce bile. So a lot of people think that the gallbladder produces bile. It does not. It just stores it. The liver actually produces the bile. And why we're going to talk about why the gallbladder is not optional. You know, a lot of people think, well, the gallbladder is not working and, or it's only working at 30%. So we're going to take it out, which I never understood because isn't 30% better than 0%, Kari?
Right. But anyway,
we won't go there.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about, if you don't have a gallbladder, what you can do and some strategies. And then of course, we're going to tie that in with the emotion. So
yeah.
What does the gallbladder do? As I mentioned, it releases bile. About 90 minutes after a meal is usually when you get the gallbladder release. So basically what happens is that food becomes this like bolus of what they call chyme, which is all the digestive juices, hydrochloric acid, with the food. And when that chyme gets acidic enough, so the pH in the stomach should be anywhere between 1.5 and 2, right? That's when you're going to get the really good breakdown of the proteins and all the macros in the stomach. And so when that bolus of food hits a certain pH, it signals that gallbladder to release bile. And it also signals the pancreas to release enzymes. And again, that's about 90 minutes after a meal. And what happens is The reason why the gallbladder and the pancreas release their quote unquote juices is because when that kind of food starts to move into the small intestine, it has to be more alkaline. So alkaline means it brings up the pH of that food, or else you will develop ulcerations in your small intestines, aka a duodenal ulcer. Because the stomach is really specific, it's actually lined with a mucus to help protect the lining from all the acid in the stomach. It's specifically designed to be super acidic. I know a lot of times, and again, I'm getting off a little bit, but everybody talks about not having too much acid in the stomach. Your stomach should be an acid producing machine in order to get good bile release. So remember, that's the first step to get good bile release is really on that acidic stomach. So that was a long explanation of what gallbladder does, but.
Well, I think you can see how important it is, because I think sometimes, which it's not a bad thing to focus on what you eat. Of course not, right? It matters. However, this matters tremendously because if you can eat all the right foods, but if you're not digesting them and absorbing them correctly, you're not going to get nearly what you think you are out of it, right? I mean, I think that's just a step that we miss so often.
Oh, it's huge. And a lot of people that we see have gut problems, small intestine, large intestine. That's gut is the collective name for those. You always have to start north of those, which is the stomach, gallbladder. Yeah. And the gallbladder is so important for gut health because it literally disinfects the gut. It's like a disinfectant to the gut, which is super important to keep those pHs healthy and normal, and keep the growth of the bad bacteria down and the growth of the good bacteria normal.
So you can see how if you only focus on maybe like what's in the gut and what's maybe overgrown, or, you're constantly trying to kill, then you're kind of missing the root of the issue, right? It's like Jenn said, it's north of the actual problem. So it's not bad to do that necessarily, but I think you can't only do that because you're just going to be constantly chasing your tail.
Correct. And here's the problem when you don't have a gallbladder. So you normally get that release 90 minutes after the meal. Well, now you're making gallbladder, but you can't store it and release it at the necessary time. And so really the best thing if you don't have a gallbladder is to take the concentrated bile salts about 90 minutes after a meal. That's when you'll get the bile release. And so a lot of people make the mistake, and you'll see a lot of products out there that will have hydrochloric acid and bile salts together in a product. And that's just, it's in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I think that is counterproductive because you have something that's really acidic and something that's really alkaline, and they're working at different times and doing different things.
Right.
So you want a separate hydrochloric acid product and you want a separate bile acid product if you don't have a gallbladder.
Right. And if you're waiting on your doctor to tell you that you might need to take these if you don't have a gallbladder, then I would probably tell you not to wait any longer, because it's unfortunate. Like it's an easy way to support your body if you do have to have your gallbladder removed, or if you have and you're like, wow, I didn't know any of this, or I probably wouldn't have got it removed. Either way, you're at where you're at now, and you know this information. And so we are actually going to put links in the show notes and in the description of this video for what we would recommend if you do want to start taking some of these, if you don't have a gallbladder. And so we would just encourage you to look at the links, and you can always send us questions if you have those.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't forget that, remember, bile helps you break down fat. So it basically has two jobs. It helps you break down fat and it helps you detoxify. So the first one, breaking down fat, you need to be able to absorb fat because that's how, your cells, the outside layer of your cells, that it's called a phospholipid bilayer. That just means there's two fat layers on the outside of your cell that allow good things to go in and bad things to come out. And you need to repair those cell membranes on a daily basis. But also you need to absorb your fat soluble vitamins, and you do that with bile. And most people are deficient in vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, correct?
Correct. And even if you're taking a supplement of those, you still have to make use of it, So you might be like, oh, I'm just going to supplement, which isn't a bad idea. I mean, a lot of people are deficient, but you still have to break it down and put it to use, and you need bile to do that. So.
Definitely. And also I forgot vitamin D. That's another fat soluble vitamin that's
Yes.
super important that if your gallbladder is not working, and in my opinion, I think that's why a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D too, is because their gallbladder is struggling, especially women, because women obviously have higher levels of estrogen, and estrogen coagulates bile and makes it thick and viscous.
Yeah.
And so, especially for women, they are just more prone to gallbladder issues.
Right.
And we'll see a lot of times women that are overweight in their 40s will start to have gallbladder issues because of that. So if you're female, if you're overweight, if you're in your 40s, it's usually about the time when we really start seeing them take out gallbladders or dysfunction of the gallbladder.
Or start having a lot of hormonal issues too. I mean, you know, like you're like entering perimenopause and then you have all these other things going on, and it just makes it so much worse of a transition. So that's why we've talked about a little bit about how it's so important to get on top of these things. And it's kind of like playing catch up if you are entering that age and you haven't maybe thought about some of these things and tried to address them. And two, you know, when you were talking just specifically about, you know, some of the fat soluble vitamins, it's like, and just supplements in general, I just think it's not, I mean, supplements are great. They are. But if you just take a supplement forever and don't necessarily fix the issue, then you're not really getting to the root of the issue. So that's why it's just, you know, I don't necessarily love supplement recommendations that are just like blanket recommendations. Everybody needs vitamin D, or everybody needs, you know, this or that. I just think they might be helpful for a certain amount of time, but you need to be working on why you need them in the process, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important. You can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month on supplements, and you're not really getting where you want to go, right? You don't want to be dependent on supplements.
Right. And don't get us wrong. We use supplements and we use a lot of supplements, but we are using them, you know, therapeutically. Strategically to get you to a place where then you can use foods, you can use your diet, you can use supplementation sparingly. Like you're probably going to always have to supplement with magnesium.
I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, I get it.
Yeah. But no, Kari's right. And then, you know, detox. So the second part of that is detox.
Yeah.
Bile is super important to help you detox, especially as Kari mentioned, for hormonal balance, because bile is how we, you know, help support the removal of estrogen. Yeah. Again, for women becomes even more important. And right, Kari, we're exposed to a ton of environmental toxins that mimic estrogens. They're called xenoestrogens. And so it becomes super important, right?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I just think sometimes we only focus, like specifically talking about all the chemicals that we might be exposed to, all that. Sometimes we can hyper focus on that and not necessarily look at why our body is not able to get rid of them. Like, you can do both. You should do both. But I just don't like the fear that's associated with like, I have to just, you know, avoid all chemicals. It's just not possible, first of all. And it's just stressful. So like our body should be able to, you know, have a drainage funnel, which this is part of, to be able to get rid of and properly dispose of the things that we are exposed to from the outside. And also, again, like Jenn was saying about the hormones, right? We have to make, use, and get rid of our hormones. It should all work together. And we're really not getting to the root of the problem if we only focus on just trying to eliminate all toxins and just live this super clean lifestyle. It's just very unattainable, to be honest, and it's stressful.
Yes. And with that said, you should eliminate as many toxins as possible, but you should be supporting the system so that you can eliminate the toxins.
Yeah.
Because you are going to be exposed to them.
Right. I mean, there's a reason why you can't, you know, there's a reason why you're not detoxing properly. So if you don't fix that and just constantly feel like you need to be on a protocol or a detox or just clean up your lifestyle or clean up your diet, I'm not saying any of those things are bad, but it's just like this constant stress, and that in itself is not good either. So it's just a really bad cycle that I see a lot of people in. But yet, if we really got to the root of the issue, physically, and then dug deeper, maybe even with emotionally, we wouldn't have to live in this constant state and this constant cycle that we find ourselves in so often.
Sure. So Kari, do you want to talk about the main symptoms that we see a lot that kind of are, good signs that the gallbladder probably isn't working the way it needs to.
Yeah. I would say like in a nutshell, it would be the top two would probably be digestive and hormonal issues. Wouldn't you say those would kind of be the top two?
Absolutely.
But if somebody says they're constantly bloated or burping or even constipation, like those are really key signs that your gallbladder needs support, especially
Right.
the burping. If you just find yourself burping a lot after meals,
Yep.
that's super key. Migraines is also one of them because of the way that your drainage pathways are not working and things are just backing up. That's a
Right.
key one for the gallbladder. Just again, feeling super full after meals because you're not able to digest properly. That one's key as well. Floating stools is another one because you're not digesting fats well. That's one that is super, like, okay, if somebody says their stools are floating, their gallbladder is not working properly.
Right. Right. Or sorry to interrupt you, but sometimes they'll even see like a little clear, like fat layer, like, shiny layer in the toilet when they have a stool, which is another sign again that they're not absorbing those fats.
Right. Yes. And sometimes just going back and forth, maybe between constipation and diarrhea, something known as like IBS type symptoms, that can be a sign that you're just not necessarily releasing bile at the right time, or it's not, something is wrong with, the gallbladder as far as that goes. Acid reflux for sure, because you're not digesting well. And even like itchiness can be a sign because, again, that detox pathway isn't working properly and you're not breaking down histamines properly. And so all of that kind of is tied together, which is one that you probably wouldn't necessarily think would be related.
Right. And to go with that, dry skin, because you're not absorbing the fats. I mean, that can be thyroid too, but if your skin is flaky and super dry, that could definitely be tied to it, as well as the itching for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it's kind of like, how does our gallbladder get off then? Right. We kind of have talked about, what it does and some signs that it might be off and why it's so important. A lot of it, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the emotional component. Excuse me. Diet does come into play here. If you're eating a ton of just maybe fried foods or you're cooking a lot with these rancid seed oils, that it increases inflammation and really affects a lot of your organs, not just gallbladder. Dehydration is another one, right? Could speak to more of like what bile is made of. That would probably help in the conversation of why dehydration is so important.
Yeah. So, gallbladder is made of water, cholesterol, bile salts. There's probably one more, but I'm forgetting. But anyway, so dehydration can definitely add to, improper, bile production for sure.
Right. And then stomach acid, sodium is so important for that, for the production of stomach acid. So the electrolytes are super key when you think of just your whole drainage funnel in a nutshell, and so many other processes, of course.
Right. And I always say, if there's one thing you can do, it's the minerals. Start with the minerals.
Yes.
An adrenal cocktail or the relay, scoop of relay. Right. So important.
Yes, truly. I mean, like, again, with the gallbladder and liver, there's really not anybody I don't see that can, not use some support with that. There's really not anybody I see that couldn't use support with sodium, potassium either. I mean, we just run through so much of it with stress response and adrenals, just running on overdrive. So if you take anything away, that would be a great thing to kind of add in. Yes. The gallbladder has a ton of insulin receptors too. And so I think this goes into the whole situation with just blood sugar regulation as well, and helping the gallbladder work properly and then to release the bile and just for it all to work like we want it to. It does go back to blood sugar. And we are going to talk more about that in the next episode, I believe, with pancreas.
Yeah, we'll talk about blood sugar. But, pancreas or gallbladder plays into blood sugar because if you're not digesting your fats, you will have blood sugar issues because you cannot hold your blood sugar as long, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, of course, everything's connected, but we'll talk more about that. And then the emotion, of course. Yeah. That's tied in with gallbladder. I guess I can sort of speak about it. And then Kari, I think
we got plenty to share.
If you want to tell your story. But as we said, resentment is in Chinese medicine associated with gallbladder. And so I think this is a common emotion that I've experienced with my clients personally. I've seen where their gallbladder issues were not clearing up until we addressed some underlying resentment. And I've told that story. So I've seen that many times.
Yeah. And so in my own personal story, I know I shared in season 1, if you've listened to any of those episodes, and I think I probably mentioned it in some previous episode as well. I've just had digestive issues for years, to be honest. It's kind of we all can kind of think about this one thing that if it would just like go away, we'd really feel great. Yeah. That's it for me. And mainly on the constipation side, it's just something I've dealt with for a while, and it would get better. It would get worse. It just, it's just something that I feel like the Lord has there to show me what he wants to show me. And so I encourage you to think about that one symptom that you wished would go away. It's there for a reason. And so anyway, that was mine. That is mine. And, just in knowing that resentment went with the gallbladder and how important it is with digestion. And, earlier this year, I really realized there was someone in my life that I needed to work on forgiveness with. And really that goes hand in hand with resentment, just the anger, resentment of things that maybe happened in the past that just were lingering, and that I'm really good at just keeping, just keep going. And that happened in the past, and just kind of separating myself from that. But the Lord really showed me that, hey, you can't continue to do that. It's fine to leave the past in the past, of course, but not if it's not been dealt with per se. And so I was just still carrying that. So I just really prayed a ton about just, the Lord, please help me. I don't know how to work. I didn't know how to work through emotions. And so it was just something I prayed a lot about. Jenn helped me with. I used tapping as well. That really helps. The forgive oil really helped me. And so it was just something that the Lord has just helped me to be able to work through and put down, and still working through. It's funny, in the next episode, I'll kind of share what he revealed was almost like the next layer, but, I have seen my digestion improve, but of course it's still a work in progress, which is okay. It's okay to not be, right where we want to be sometimes, but I know it's still there for a reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to encourage you that, the organ emotion sheet that we keep sharing over and over again, look at that sheet, look at the organs. If you're having certain conditions or symptoms related to those organs, look at the negative emotions and look at what the positive emotion is.
Right.
And that might help lead you to what God is sort of calling you to bring to light and to work through and to wrestle with a little bit.
Yeah. And while we're talking about that sheet, and of course we'll link it in the show notes and description of the video, but, if you're like, I don't know if tapping is right for me, the emotional freedom technique, hey, you can use the oil with prayer. Like, you can just use the oil by itself. You don't necessarily have to add that in if you don't feel like the Lord is calling you to that. I think it's super important for us to have discernment for ourselves. And so we encourage you to do that with anything, right? I mean, it's just super important, but especially with something like that. But I do really love those charts that kind of share what the emotion organ connection is, and it does share the positive emotion. So it's all about awareness, honestly, and just walking with the Spirit to allow the Lord to reveal more and more to you. So we hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And if you feel like any of those symptoms that we talked about, if you feel like you're struggling maybe and you just need some gallbladder support, or you think it might be connected to something that you're struggling with, we'd love to help you. But Kari, you want to talk a little bit about the Ephesians verse that you picked for us? Yeah.
So, I just love how God's word speaks to us, and just, gosh, it just gets up to us on so many new levels when we do have these bits of awareness that he brings to our mind. It's just like, gosh, I just see the word in such a new and fresh way every single time I look at it now, because I just know he's talking and, talking to me through it. But this verse in Ephesians kind of stuck out to me. It's Ephesians 4:32. It says, "Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you." And it just really helps me to realize I mean, I don't deserve forgiveness. And so a lot of other people, maybe we don't feel like they deserve forgiveness, but we have to never forget that nobody deserves what Christ did for us on the cross. So if we keep that in mind, it just helps us to give forgiveness freely, right? Even if they don't deserve it, even if they don't even know, right? I think sometimes we're like, we want them to know what they've done and we want them to, just feel pain for it. But that's, I try to let that go and just trust that I have to forgive as I was forgiven. And so that just, honestly, when we harbor these negative emotions, it really just hurts us. And it really just keeps us further from the Lord. And it keeps us detached sometimes from other people and definitely detached from the Lord. And so that is really what it's helped me that's what he has helped me to see over the last few months. And I'm just super thankful for it. And I just feel a lot more peace. I think that's what honestly we all want. And we don't realize that these things are they're standing in the way of that.
Yes. And of our physical health.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
It all goes together.
It sure does. They talked about just resentment, just being a really strong emotion, and it is a strong emotion. And it, I think holding the resentment is more detrimental for you than the other person that you're holding the resentment for. So it's really, hopefully, with God's help, you can work, like Kari said, work through the resentment and offer the forgiveness, obviously through God's grace only. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anything we've shared in here just piqued your interest and you have questions, or if, you're looking for something we talked about, you can always check out the show notes and then the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. But we're just super excited to have these conversations and we hope they're helpful. We would love feedback. Like, we want to talk to you guys. So we send out a weekly email. We'll put that obviously in the links we share too. Join that. And we'd always just love to hear from you just by replying to that email. It's just a super simple way to continue the conversation. So we are excited to continue this series, and we will see you on the next episode.
Take care.